So I decided to do this thing. This thing. I saw this play in New York a couple of years ago.
When I was 15 years old, I would travel the country giving speeches about the Constitution at American Legion halls for prize money. This was a scheme invented by my mom to help me pay for college. I would travel to big cities like Denver and Fresno. I would give a speech, win a whole bunch of money, and then bring it back to put in my little safety deposit box for later.
This woman was a playwright and an actor, and she told the story of her life, and it was funny and compelling, and I thought, well, I can do that. I thought, I'm a playwright. I'm not an actor, but I still ought to be able to do that. So I took a class with Dr. Carver, and I wrote the story of my life as a play. So in 1953, President Eisenhower signed that executive order. Now, something else important happened in 1953. My mom and dad got married. Now, maybe that part's only important to me, but that's the way it was. And we read it in the Missouri Playwrights Workshop. And then I submitted it for the Mizzou New Play Festival, and it got selected, and I performed it there. I got introduced by Dr. Crespi and everything.
And without any further ado, here is Andrew Black and what same-sex marriage means to me.
So I wasn't sure what to do next, but we have this Facebook page for the Missouri Playwrights Workshop, and this woman who is a member of the group put a post on the page asking if anybody had any material that they would be interested in having produced by a local theater. And I thought, well, what the heck? So I wrote the woman and I said, hey, I have this play that I wrote, and what do you think? So I told her about the play, and she wrote back and she said, hey, I love that idea. And tell me, would you be interested in having your play produced by the Farnham and Bias Playhouse at the end of April? I mean, she meant April 2021. So I thought it over, and I thought, well, what the heck? No guts, no glory, right? So I talked it over with Dr. Crespi, and he didn't seem to think it was the worst idea he'd ever heard. And I talked it over with Dr. Brown, and he said, go for it. And I talked it over with Dr. Carver, and she was supportive. So the next thing I knew, we were talking about how we were going to produce the play. We decided to do it as a script in hand reading. And so it really wasn't enough time for me to memorize all of the text. So that made sense. And I told everybody that I was going to do it like Spalding Gray. Now, just between us, if I hadn't done a presentation on Spalding Gray earlier this year in this class, I would have had no idea that that's how Spalding Gray did things. So I was actually able to talk about our choice to do the play as a script in hand reading as if it were an artistic decision, not a matter of personal expedience, because I wouldn't have had time to memorize all that dialogue. But interestingly enough, the concept of homosexuality had actually been mentioned openly on TV even before I was born, back in 1954, when the Army McCarthy hearings were televised. So I could see a few possibilities embedded in this opportunity here. For one thing, I'd be able to experiment with a real live audience. Now, we were going to do socially distanced theater, but it would be face-to-face, which would allow me to have some real interactivity with the audience, which I thought would be fun and play to some of my personal strengths. Well, the primary way that this code of ethics was transmitted to me was through Bible stories. And in my case, it was a lot of Bible stories. And believe you me, I could have done a lot worse. For instance, one of my favorite stories is the story of Zacchaeus. Now, who in here knows the story of Zacchaeus? Okay, my husband. Monica, you don't know the story of Zacchaeus?
I'm not raising my hand because you're making me say it. And then
I'm not going to be... Oh, she's on to me. Now, Brett, you raise your hand. You know the story of Zacchaeus?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm about to tell the story of Zacchaeus. I'm asking for a little help as I tell it.
Okay.
And then if I get it wrong, you can feel free to raise your hand and correct me as I go. Not doing the play on Zoom would allow us to actually experiment with some real production elements. I mean, we could use props in the show. We could do projections. There was a great opportunity to explore what was possible in terms of producing the play in real time in a space. I don't have an extensive network in Columbia, Missouri, but I'd be able to push the idea out on social media. Maybe I could attract some attention for it. And there existed the possibility to take some really fun production photos that I could use later to promote the work. Not only that, but the play as it's at was way too long. It was about 2 hours. So this would give me the opportunity to work with somebody on an ongoing basis and make some strategic cuts. Maybe I could actually get my content down to a manageable size. I knew the timeline was really aggressive, and I am a PhD student, so it's not as if I was looking for a new project. But on balance, I thought maybe I could use this opportunity and make something out of it. So the dramatic question I was facing was, would Andy Black be able to take this opportunity and make any kind of theater magic with it? So I got to the second rehearsal and found out that the theater was closing. The founders of the theater had a little disagreement. They decided not to work together anymore, and so the theater company was going to be giving up its space at the end of April. I would be the last production by the Farnham and Bias Playhouse. What this also meant was that there was not going to be a lot of support for my production. Basically, whatever happened was going to happen as a result of the efforts of the director and me. I am not an actor. There was going to be a lot of blocking. I had a script. I was going to have to write things down. I was going to have to be able to read my own writing later and remember what I had written and replicate a movement that the director and I had agreed upon. These were all new concepts, not up here, but down here where it really counted. According to my research, the movie is 73 minutes long, 90 minutes, of course, with commercials. And I sat there as full of anxiety as could have been humanly possible while I watched that TV show about how this guy had to tell his son about how he was in a relationship with another man, all the while praying that no one in my family would come walking into that bedroom, ask what I was watching, and why I had that funny look on my face. The director was 25 years old. She didn't understand references that I had made in this script. She didn't understand some of the ways I thought about my own life. She thought that parts of my story were boring and didn't forward the action. She asked me to make cuts. I surrendered to the process and I made the cuts. At the very end, she asked me to make more cuts. I didn't want to make them. I had cut to what I thought was the bone. But I very obediently wrote down everything that she said and decided that I would think about it later and decide what to do. We set aside the text and we went back to the blocking. There was a piece that she asked me to run which involved moving a music stand from one location to another. When I got to the second location, I was supposed to put it down firmly. I was having a little bit of trouble managing my script and the music stand and seeing the spike marks and making it all go well. And in the back of my head, I still had this idea about all those cuts that I was going to have to think about when I got home that night. So as I practiced moving the music stand and putting it down firmly, I put it down really firmly. And my director said to me, "You know, Andy, that reads as anger," which was not the intention that she had when she gave me that blocking note. And I realized that the reason that my putting of the music stand down in such a firm manner read as anger was because I was angry about all those cuts I was going to have to make. So what I decided I was going to have to do was set all that anger aside for the time being, focus on the music stand, and do my own process around letting go. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't stressful. And the responsibility of producing the event on top of creating it added another level of stress. And the dark evil spirit that was floating around in the back of the performance space the whole time we were there was, would anybody come to the show? And then on opening night, we had a house of about 10 or 12 people. Thank goodness Dr. Crespi and Dr. Burgoyne were there in the front row. It was a little hard for me getting into the flow. My husband was there that night and he said to me, "You know, you seemed nervous." Well, the reason I seemed nervous was because I was nervous. Now that the dust has settled, I'm happy to say that there were a lot of really positive takeaways. I have a tight 75-minute script. I've been able to experiment with projections and with props. I had a wonderful relationship with my director, and I got really valuable input from her from a fresh perspective about what was working in my text and what I could let go of. So in terms of my major dramatic question about whether Andy Black would be able to make theater magic or not at the Farnham and Bias Playhouse at the end of April 2021, I'm going to leave that to you all to decide. So thank you for listening to my final performance about a guy who had a play he decided he was going to write and a production that came his way and maybe even the opportunity to make a little theater magic. And I hope that all of you, as you pursue your own goals, aspirations, and autobiographies, can make wonderful theater magic yourselves. In some cases, it seems that the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true.